Welcome to our channel, Everyday South Africa. So today we're doing a real deep dive into a place that, maybe more than any other, really captures a century of struggle, resilience, and frankly, neglect in South Africa. We're talking about Alexandra Township.
That's right. Known to everyone as Alex.
Alex, yeah.
And it's this fascinating, almost contradictory place. Geographically, it's tiny, right? Just 13 kilometers northeast of Johannesburg's city center.
Practically right next door to Sandton, which is, famously one of the wealthiest areas in Africa.
Exactly. And yet, Alex's story is one of just persistent systemic disadvantage. It's one of Joburg's oldest black settlements, founded way before most others we think of.
And its very existence, really, is a symbol of that deep inequity, that kind of tragic unfairness that's marked South African cities for, well, over 100 years now.
It truly is.
And for this deep dive, we've got some fantastic source material to work with. We're drawing on South African History Online archives, academic work from historians like Bonner and Yves de Godian.
Really important stuff. Wits archives, too. And then summaries about that huge post-apartheid effort, the Alexandra Renewal Project, the ARP.
Right, the ARP. And maybe my favorite part, some really vivid, on-the-ground media that gets into its unique street culture, especially the food. We've even got YouTube transcripts capturing that energy.
Which is crucial for understanding the spirit of the place. So our mission here, for you listening, is really to unpack the core paradox of Alex.
Which is?
How has this tiny, incredibly densely packed area, we're talking about 20 square blocks, how has it survived for over a century? I mean, structurally, everything was against it. Apartheid, neglect, overcrowding. It should have collapsed.
But it didn't.
It didn't. It not only survived, but it somehow fostered this incredible creativity politically, culturally. It just refused to die, despite all the forces trying to erase it or exploit it.
It really is the township that refused to die. Okay, let's get into it. We have to start right at the beginning, don't we? Turn of the 20th century. Because how Alex was founded is, well, it's key to everything that follows.
Absolutely. The origin story itself sets the stage. So we go back to 1904.
Okay.
There's a farmer, H.B. Papenfus. He buys this piece of land, including a farm called Zandfontein. And his plan, initially, was pretty standard for the time.
To build a white suburb.
Right.
Far from the noise of the gold rush city.
Exactly. He wanted to create a new, whites-only residential area, nice and exclusive.
So why didn't that happen? We see similar developments all around Johannesburg from that era.
Well, two main things went wrong for his plan.
Yeah.
First, it was pretty remote back then. I mean, 13 kilometers was a significant distance in 1904 without modern transport.
Sure.
And second, the land itself. It just wasn't that appealing to the white buyers he was targeting. Maybe the soil, the terrain, whatever it was, it didn't attract them.
So a market failure, essentially.
Complete market failure. And that failure forced Papenfus to pivot. He needed to get his investment back somehow.
And that pivot is where things get interesting for Alex's future. It even ties into the naming, doesn't it? There's that little dispute.
Yeah, it's a minor historical footnote, but kind of telling. Was it named to honor Queen Alexandra, King Edward VII's wife? Sort of lending it official prestige.
Or was it named after Alexandra, the daughter of E.H. Papenfus? He was the township secretary and technically the owner of the land. So state recognition versus, family legacy.
Right. Interesting, but the really critical moment comes in 1912. Because the plan for a white settlement failed, the area was instead proclaimed a native township.
Okay, proclaimed under the rules that existed before the Union of South Africa was fully formed.
Precisely. Under pre-Union legislation, specifically the Native Urban Areas Act. Now, for anyone listening who isn't deep into South African legal history...
Which is probably most of us.
Right. What did native township mean at that specific moment? It meant it was officially designated for black occupation. But here's the kicker, the legal quirk, the anomaly that makes Alexandra so different from, say, Sophiatown or later Soweto.
Okay.
Just 1 year later, 1913, the government passes the absolutely devastating Natives Land Act.
Yeah, the 1913 Land Act. That's the cornerstone of segregation, isn't it? The law that restricted black land ownership to just a tiny fraction, like 7 or 8% of the entire country. Crippling.
Utterly crippling for generations. But here's the loophole. Alexandra was already established. It was already proclaimed under the old rules before the 1913 Act came into force.
So it was grandfathered in a way.
Sort of. It meant that Alexandra became one of the very, very few places, maybe the only one near Johannesburg, where black South Africans could still legally buy freehold land.
Freehold, meaning they owned it outright, not just renting from the council or a white landlord.
Exactly. They owned the title deed. This wasn't supposed to happen after 1913. It was a monumental exception to the rule, a crack in the wall of segregation.
Wow. That must have created an immediate draw, a sense of opportunity you just couldn't find elsewhere near the city.
Absolutely. It offered a level of stability, a chance to build something permanent, maybe even pass down property, security against just being kicked out on a whim.
And the sources show people jumped at this chance.
Immediately. The records show the first 40 black families arrived in 1913. And they weren't putting up shacks, they built proper, sturdy houses, brick houses, some of them.
Investments. They saw it as a real investment in their future based on actual ownership.
Definitely. And word spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
By 1916, just 3 years later, the population is estimated to have swelled to around 30,000 people.
30,000, that quickly.
Yeah. Mostly rural migrants coming to Joburg for work. The mines, the factories were booming. They heard this was the place where you could actually own your home near the city. It was an incredible pull factor.
It sounds like this brief, maybe accidental window of genuine autonomy built on a legal fluke almost.
It really was a unique moment of self-determination. But as you might guess, the state wasn't going to let this anomaly persist indefinitely.
Right. How long did this freehold status actually last? When did they close that loophole?
It was painfully short-lived. The ability to buy new freehold plots started getting chipped away, and then it was completely abolished in the 1930s.
So about 2 decades, maybe a bit more.
Roughly that. It was Prime Minister J.B. Herzog's government. They were all about centralizing control, implementing segregationist policies more uniformly. His government passed laws designed specifically to eliminate these pockets of black independence and land ownership.
So they just legislated it out of existence.
Pretty much. Nationwide. Alexandra's unique historical advantage, that foundation of potential economic independence through property, wiped out by government policy. It set the stage for decades of struggle.
So we go from this place of unique promise, built on land ownership, to a place where residents are suddenly stripped of that right, becoming vulnerable tenants.
Exactly. And right alongside that loss of rights came this massive failure of administration, which basically locked in poverty and neglect for decades to come.
Let's talk about that neglect. How did it start?
Well, the first big problem was just basic governance. As the population hit 30,000 by 1916, they realized something needed to be done. So they formed an Alexandra Health Committee.
A health committee. That sounds, well, it doesn't sound like a proper local government for a town that size.
It wasn't meant to be. It was deliberately weak. Crucially, this committee had no power to levy taxes. None.
No taxing power means no independent money.
Precisely. It had no revenue stream of its own. And here's the other key part. The nearby Johannesburg City Council provided zero financial support, zero administrative help. Nothing.
How could they justify that? Alex was right there, supplying labor to the city.
Their excuse was that Alexandra was technically outside the official Johannesburg municipal boundaries, so conveniently, not their problem.
So no internal funding mechanism, no external support. That's a recipe for disaster.
Absolute disaster. Chronic underfunding was baked into Alex's existence from the start. It meant inevitable problems. Terrible sanitation, no proper roads, no reliable water, disease spreading.
And that's how it got that nickname.
That's exactly it. Nobody's baby. It perfectly captured the situation. Here was this growing settlement, essential to the city's economy, yet officially no level of government, not local, not provincial, not national at that point, was willing to take financial or administrative responsibility for it.
It's left to fend for itself. How long did that status quo last, that administrative limbo?
For decades. It only officially ended in 1960. That's when the apartheid state finally stepped in and imposed direct government control over Alexandra.
1960. So over 40 years of being nobody's baby.
More than 4 decades of systemic neglect. By the time the government took over in 1960, the damage to infrastructure, the entrenched poverty, the terrible living conditions, it was already profound. They were basically taking control of a crisis they had actively allowed, even encouraged, to develop.
And meanwhile, after the freehold rights were gone in the 30s, what happened to the people living there? The ones who'd built homes?
They became tenants, often in the very homes they might have once owned or aspired to own. And this created a new opportunity for exploitation.
Landlords.
Exactly. The sources talk about unscrupulous landlords, often white absentee landlords, moving in. Remember, the 1913 Land Act and other laws were restricting where black people could live everywhere else. This created artificial housing scarcity near Joburg.
So demand for housing in Alex, even neglected Alex, Was high.
Extremely high. People had few other options near the city. So these landlords could charge exorbitant rents for often terrible accommodation. They knew people were trapped. Alex became this source of easy profit built on racist policies and desperation.
It sounds like a completely hopeless situation, stripped of rights, neglected by the state, exploited by landlords.
It does. But what's incredible is that the historical record shows Alexandra didn't just succumb to despair. Instead, it became this amazing hub of community organization and resistance. They learned how to fight back.
How do they do that? What tools do they have?
Their main weapon initially was economic pressure. And their location, that 13-kilometer distance from the city center, became leverage.
Ah, transport.
Precisely. We see the first major example of this in the 1940 bus boycott.
Okay, tell us about that. It was protesting fare increases.
Fare increases, yes, but it was also a broader protest against general government neglect of Alex and other townships. The bus companies wanted to charge more, but residents felt they were getting nothing in return: terrible roads, no services.
And boycotting the buses meant walking.
Walking. Up to 15 kilometers each way, every single day. Uphill, downhill, rain or shine.
For how long?
6 months.
6 months. That's unbelievable commitment. Imagine the physical toll, the time lost.
It's staggering. This wasn't just a symbolic week-long protest. This was a sustained, grueling, community-wide sacrifice. People got up hours earlier, got home hours later, day after day.
That level of sustained pressure must have had an impact. Did it work?
It was a resounding success. It forced the bus company to back down on the fare hikes. More importantly, it proved that collective action, even nonviolent economic action, could actually work. It showed the power the community held.
And it set a precedent, right? They used this tactic again.
They did, even more effectively in 1955. Another massive bus boycott. This time it lasted 3 months.
3 months is still huge. Who organized that one?
It was organized by the Alexandra People's Transport Committee, and a key figure leading it was a young, up-and-coming ANC leader named Alfred Denzo.
Alfred Denzo. Okay, so the ANC was involved by then.
Yes, the resistance was becoming more formally political. This boycott targeted PUTCO, the main bus company, and the Johannesburg City Council again. The pressure was immense. It hit PUTCO's profits hard, and it disrupted the labor supply getting into the city. Businesses started complaining.
So it wasn't just the transport company feeling the heat.
No, it escalated. This time, the boycott forced not only PUTCO and the city council to negotiate, but it also brought the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce to the table, the big business interests.
And the outcome.
They were forced to introduce a voucher system to keep fares down. Crucially, this system was subsidized by the Chamber of Commerce itself.
Wow. So the residents used their collective economic power to force both the state and the private sector to basically subsidize their transport.
Exactly. It showed incredible strategic thinking. They understood the economic levers. This success, this model of organized economic disruption, became hugely influential for the ANC and the wider anti-apartheid movement across the country.
So even in the face of neglect and exploitation, Alex was already, very early on, becoming a kind of laboratory for resistance strategies. It wasn't just surviving, it was teaching others how to fight back.
Absolutely. And that spirit only intensified as we move into the height of the apartheid era.
Right, let's shift into that period, the 1940s through the 1980s. Apartheid is being formally constructed, laws are getting harsher. What's happening in Alex?
Oh, paradoxically, as the rest of the country became more rigidly segregated and controlled, Alex solidified its reputation. It became this crucible, a place of intense political ferment, but also incredible cultural vibrancy.
It drew some really significant figures. Nelson Mandela living there in 1941 is obviously huge.
Monumental. He rented a single room there when he first came to Johannesburg, and his description of life in Alex back then is so telling. He called it exhilarating and precarious.
Exhilarating and precarious. That captures the contradiction, doesn't it?
Perfectly. The precarious part is clear: the poverty, the lack of sanitation, the constant threat of police raids, the insecure tenure. But exhilarating, that speaks to the energy, the political discussions happening everywhere, the sense of community, the cultural life, because it was still, relatively speaking, less tightly controlled than the later purpose-built townships.
That tension must have shaped his early thinking.
No doubt, experiencing that mix of freedom and danger, community and hardship right at the start of his political journey.
And the culture wasn't just background noise. It was central to Alex's identity. You mentioned Hugh Masekela, the jazz legend, came from Alex,
Yes. And the music scene was incredible. The sources talk about this amazing blend of styles. You had Marabi music.
which came out of the 1920s, right? Played in the shebeens.
Exactly. Simple chord structures, often played on cheap pianos or guitars, but with this infectious rhythm. It was the soundtrack to the illegal bars, the social hubs, a kind of cultural defiance in itself.
And then Quela music in the 50s.
Yeah, Quilla became huge. That distinctive penny whistle sound, very rhythmic, blending local styles with American jazz influences. It was music born from the streets, joyful and resilient.
So this vibrant cultural life, this music, it's all happening right there, amidst the poverty and the political tension. It's a form of resistance, too.
Absolutely. And importantly, the sources note that Alex, despite the segregation laws tightening elsewhere, still had this surprising mix of people. There were significant Indian and Chinese communities, even some white residents, drawn into this cultural melting pot, especially around the music and the shebeens.
A kind of informal, de facto integration happening below the radar of the state.
For a time, yes, like a little island of multiracial interaction in a sea of enforced separation. And this internal strength, this cultural vibrancy, I think, is part of what helped Alex survive the constant threats of demolition.
Because the government did try to get rid of it, right? Under the Group Areas Act, they flattened places like Sophiatown. Why not Alex?
They definitely wanted to. There were repeated plans and threats to demolish Alex and forcibly remove everyone, but it kept getting spared. And the main reason seems to be almost embarrassingly practical for the apartheid state.
What was that?
Cost. By the 1940s, the population was already around 60,000, and that number kept growing, partly because the government itself sometimes dumped people there who'd been evicted from other informal settlements.
So they made the problem bigger themselves.
Ironically, yes. And when they calculated the sheer cost of forcibly removing tens, then hundreds of thousands of people providing alternative housing, however basic, policing the operation, it was just deemed too expensive, especially for a population that had historical roots, including those early freehold claims, however tenuous they become.
So their sheer numbers, their history, and the state's own budget constraints essentially saved them. That's incredible. A kind of passive resistance through presence.
It really is. They simply became too big, too entrenched, too costly to dislodge according to the state's own cold calculations.
Amazing. But the state didn't just give up trying to control Alex. They tried imposing their own structures later on.
Oh, absolutely. Fast forward to 1985. The height of the state of emergency, intense resistance across the country. The government tries to impose its black local authorities and township councils.
These were seen as puppet bodies, right?
Yeah.
Extensions of the apartheid system.
Completely rejected by most residents. And in Alex, the response was immediate and powerful. They didn't just boycott the state structures, they created their own alternative.
This is the Alexandra Action Committee, the AA.
Yes, the AAC is one of the most stunning examples of community self-governance under apartheid. It was incredibly organized.
How'd it work?
They divided the entire township into a grid system: yard committees, block committees, and street committees. It was grassroots democracy in action.
And these committees actually ran things.
They took over the day-to-day running of Alex, things the state wouldn't do, or did badly. Organizing garbage collection, providing local security through patrols, mediating neighborhood disputes, even enforcing rent boycotts against exploitative landlords. They effectively created a parallel administration.
A functioning, community-led local government built from the ground up in direct opposition to the state. That organizational capacity, maybe honed during those earlier bus boycotts, really came to fruition.
It was remarkable. It showed that even under extreme repression, the community could assert control over its own affairs. But this period of intense resistance and self-governance also led to brutal crackdowns.
Right, the mid-'80s were incredibly violent in Alex. There was that redevelopment plan, the 1980 master plan. It aimed to make Alex a garden city.
Yeah, planned to upgrade housing, put in parks. On paper, it looked like development, but it was still top-down, imposed by the apartheid state. And any implementation basically ground to a halt after the explosion of violence in February 1986.
That was the Alex 6 Days uprising.
Yes. It was sparked when security forces fired on a funeral procession, a funeral for a political activist. That lit the fuse, and Alex erupted in days of intense street battles, barricades, clashes with the police and army.
So the uprising effectively killed the master plan.
Absolutely. It showed that no state-led project, no matter how well-intentioned it might seem superficially, could succeed without genuine community buy-in and political legitimacy, which was impossible under apartheid.
And it was around this time, wasn't it, that Alex got another nickname? The Dark City.
That's right, Dark City, because famously, large parts of it still had no electricity, a stark symbol of the deliberate systemic neglect, especially when you could literally see the bright lights of wealthy Sandton just across the highway.
But it has that double meaning too, right? The darkness of poverty and state repression.
Exactly. Yet through all that darkness, the resistance continued. Alex remained this potent symbol of Black resilience, holding out right until the dawn of democracy in 1994.
Which brings us to the post-apartheid era. 1994 arrives, democracy dawns, incredible hope across the country. But for Alexandra, the end of apartheid brought a whole new set of massive challenges, starting with population.
It was like a dam breaking. When the apartheid laws controlling movement, the influx control laws were finally abolished, people were free to move to the cities to seek work and better lives.
And Alexandra, being so close to the economic heart of Johannesburg, was a prime destination.
The natural destination for many, it was the known historic Black settlement right on the doorstep of opportunity, and the result was a demographic shockwave.
The numbers are just mind-boggling. We mentioned 60,000 in the 1940s. What are the estimates now?
They vary wildly, which tells you something about the difficulty of counting in such a dense, informal environment. But estimates range from maybe 400,000 people
Okay.
up to 700,000. Some even suggest close to 1 million people.
1 million people in that same original 20-square block area.
Possibly. Crammed into that tiny footprint, you have to try and visualize that density. It's almost impossible to comprehend.
And the impact on infrastructure that was already neglected for decades.
Catastrophic collapse. You pour hundreds of thousands of people onto a system designed poorly for maybe 30,000 or 60,000. Everything breaks.
So what does that look like on the ground today? What are the biggest pressures?
Water is a huge one. Persistent, really severe, low water pressure in many areas. Sanitation, the sewer systems are completely overloaded, leading to constant blockages, overflows.
Especially when it rains.
Exactly. Chronic flooding is a major problem because the stormwater drains just can't cope, or they're clogged with waste because collection is inadequate. The historical neglect of the 40s and 50s is now magnified exponentially by this incredible density.
And the housing itself. How do people live?
The sources describe it as a patchwork. It's the architecture of survival, of making do. People build homes out of whatever they can find or afford: bits of wood, corrugated iron, plastic sheeting, salvaged materials.
Often tiny spaces built right on top of each other.
Absolutely. Cheek by jowl, often multi-story informal structures,
Right.
built without proper foundations, without fire safety considerations. It's visually striking, this density, but it represents incredible vulnerability to fires, to disease, to structural collapse.
It's ingenuity born of desperation.
Precisely. Now, the new Democratic government recognized this crisis. They knew something had to be done, which led to the launch of the Alexandra Renewal Project, the ARP, in 2001.
Okay, the ARP, what was the aim there?
It was incredibly ambitious, a massive, multi-billion rand project aimed at a complete overhaul, upgrading sewers and water pipes, building thousands of new formal houses, clearing the most dangerous informal settlements, improving roads, clinics, schools, a total transformation.
It sounds like exactly what was needed, a formal acknowledgement of the historical debt owed to Alex.
That was the idea, to finally undo the legacy of nobody's baby.
So what happened? Because clearly, 2 decades later, the conditions you're describing are still incredibly challenging. Why didn't the ARP fix Alex?
Ugh. This is where the story gets complicated and, frankly, mirrors some of the earlier failures, just under a different political system. The ARP ran into huge problems almost from the start.
Such as?
Well, multiple reports and investigations have highlighted major issues: allegations of corruption, large sums of money going missing or being mismanaged,
So funding issues.
significant funding issues, and questions about where the money actually went, but also just the sheer scale of the challenge. The project struggled to keep pace with the continued influx of people into Alex. Building new houses is slow, people arriving needing shelter is fast.
And promises weren't kept.
Many infrastructure promises, crucial upgrades, were either delayed indefinitely or just never materialized. There were some successes, some areas were improved, some housing was built, but overall the ARP fell far short of its transformative goals. The execution was flawed, the challenges were immense, and the impact wasn't what was hoped for.
That cycle of hope followed by disappointment must be incredibly frustrating for residents.
Deeply demoralizing. And it contributes directly to the social and economic statistics we see today, which are really stark.
Talk about the poverty levels.
They're extreme. More than 60% of households in Alex are reported to earn less than our 2,300 a month.
2,300 rand. What's that in, say, US dollars?
At current exchange rates, that's roughly $120 USD per household per month.
Wow. That's subsistence level or below for an entire family living in a major city.
Absolutely. Deep, grinding poverty. And this, combined with extremely high youth unemployment rates, inevitably fuels social problems, including high levels of crime. Desperation breeds crime.
And the pressure on basic public services. You mentioned healthcare earlier.
The statistic is shocking. The sources mention only 5 clinics serving a population estimated, conservatively, at around 180,000 people.
One clinic for every 36,000 people.
At least. If the population is actually higher, towards those 700,000 estimates, the ratio becomes almost unimaginable. Think about the queues, the waiting times, the pressure on doctors and nurses, the lack of resources. It's a system under constant, immense strain.
So you have poverty, unemployment, crime, overwhelmed healthcare. It sounds like a pressure cooker. Does that lead to other social tensions?
Definitely. We see ongoing service delivery protests, people taking to the streets because the taps are dry or the sewage isn't collected or the electricity is off again. Direct reactions to the failures of the ARP and ongoing neglect.
And public health issues beyond the clinics.
Oh, yeah. Rat infestations are a huge problem mentioned in the sources.
Yeah.
Directly linked to the density, the challenges with waste management, the overflowing sewers. It's a constant battle for residents.
And tragically, that internal pressure has sometimes boiled over into violence directed outwards, hasn't it? Xenophobia.
Sadly, yes. The terrible wave of xenophobic violence that swept South Africa in 2008. Alexandra was one of the absolute epicenters.
Targeting foreign nationals.
Yes. Immigrants from other African countries. There were shocking incidents, including, disturbingly, black-on-black racism and violence. It highlighted the intense competition for scarce resources, for jobs, however precarious, for housing, for spots in queues, for services. When people are desperate, sometimes that frustration gets turned on the other, the perceived competitor.
So the very conditions created by neglect and overcrowding fuel conflict among the most vulnerable residents themselves.
It's a tragic consequence of that sustained structural pressure. Alex is this place defined both by the incredible resilience needed to survive external oppression and by the intense internal frictions created when so many people are forced to compete for so little.
It's such a complex picture.
Yeah.
But amidst all this hardship, all these structural failures, the sources keep coming back to this incredible sense of community, this vibrant culture. Residents still call it a wonderful place.
That's the enduring paradox, isn't it? How can it be both things at once? And the answer seems to lie in the human element, the social fabric.
It's not just defined by its problems.
Not at all. It remains this incredibly dynamic cultural hub. You walk around, you see bustling street life, vendors selling food, the sounds of music from the shebeens, those informal local pubs that are so central to social life.
And there are efforts to preserve the history, too. The Alexandra Heritage Precinct.
Yes, which is so important. Preserving sites like Mandela's first rented room, telling the story of Alex from the inside out, celebrating the resilience, not just documenting the struggle. It's about residents reclaiming their narrative.
And maybe the most powerful expression of that resilience, that creativity born from struggle, is the food, the township cuisine.
Food is always such a deep reflection of culture. And in Alex, it's culture shaped by necessity, by history, by making something special out of affordable, available ingredients. It's survival, yes, but it's also ingenuity and pride.
Let's talk about Chef Zennel. Her story seems to embody this spirit perfectly.
Her story's amazing because she didn't start in food. She actually got a diploma in civil engineering.
Civil engineering, trying to fix the very infrastructure problems plaguing Alex.
Exactly. But then she decided to follow her passion. She took over her mother's eatery and moved it right into the heart of the township, what they call Deep Alexandra.
So setting up shop in the most challenging part, infrastructure-wise.
Right in the thick of it, dealing daily with the potholes, the unreliable water, the power cuts, all the things her engineering background understands. But she chose the culinary path, bringing life and nourishment to her community through food. It's resilience in action. If you can't fix the pipes, feed the people.
Okay, let's get specific. What are some of these signature Alex dishes she makes? Start with mohudu.
Ah, mahodu, classic township soul food. It's stewed, trapped in intestines, usually sheep.
Awful, often seen as less desirable cuts, but transformed here.
Completely transformed. And the preparation tells you everything. It starts with incredibly thorough cleaning. The source emphasizes this. Wash it so you don't feel the sand or little rocks.
That takes time and care. It speaks to a high standard, even with basic ingredients.
Absolutely. It's about respect for the food and the people eating it. You have to get it perfectly clean. Then it's boiled for a long time, like 2 hours, until it's incredibly soft, meltingly tender.
And then stewed.
Stewed further, often with some simple seasonings like beef stock, maybe some white pepper. The goal isn't to mask the flavor, though. They want that distinct, slightly gamey taste.
The source says it has personality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's meant to taste like what it is. Rich, savory, deeply satisfying comfort food.
And what's it served with? Those dumplings.
Yes. The popovers. These are essential. They're not baked popovers like you might think. They're steamed dumplings. Made from a simple dough flour, yeast, sugar, salt, maybe some butter. Sometimes they add sliced carrots for a bit of color and sweetness.
And steamed, not baked.
Steamed for about half an hour until they're light, fluffy, almost cloud-like. Their whole purpose in life is to soak up that rich, savory mahodu gravy. It's the perfect pairing, the soft dumpling, the tender meat, the flavorful sauce. High energy, incredibly filling.
Okay, from traditional comfort food to something else. The slide. This sounds wild.
The slide is pure Alexandra invention. It's described as a high-calorie bomb, a monument to delicious excess, all for about $1.50.
$1.50 for a bomb. What's in it?
Get ready. It's layers. Starts with toasted bread, then bologna and salami, cheap processed meats, then a fried egg, another slice of toasted bread, cheese, a burger patty, barbecue sauce.
Okay, that's already a substantial sandwich.
But wait, there's more. It's then topped with slices of Russian sausage, another processed sausage, and Vienna sausage. And finally, a pile of well-seasoned French fries right on top.
It's like a skyscraper of processed meat and carbs.
It truly is. And the key technique, the source notes, is how they treat those cheap meats like bologna and salami. They fry them until they crisp it up.
Adding texture and flavor through frying.
Exactly. It takes inexpensive, maybe not inherently exciting ingredients and uses technique to make them really satisfying, crispy, salty, savory. It's transforming basic stuff into this over-the-top, indulgent treat. Necessity meets creativity meets pure craving.
That really shows ingenuity. Now, the sources also bring in Andrew, an expert guide, to compare Alex with Soweto. How does that comparison help us understand Alex?
It provides really useful context. Soweto, as Andrew explains, is huge, over 1.2 million people. But it was largely purpose-built under the Group Areas Act. And crucially, it tends to be more multi-generational.
Meaning families have lived there longer, grandparents, parents, children often in the same area or even the same house.
Yeah, more established roots for many families. The food reflects that too. He gives the example of the coda.
The quarter loaf of bread, right? Derived from the Indian bunny chow.
Exactly. Quarter loaf, hollowed out, but instead of curry, it's packed with typical Soweto fillings, maybe a burger patty, cheese, a cart, coleslaw, fries, a whole meal in a loaf.
And the preference for off-cut meats in Soweto, like heart and liver.
Andrew mentions that too. Often grilled, seasoned aggressively with peri-peri sauce. Sometimes seen as more masculine food, but also, crucially, much cheaper than buying steak or prime cuts. Again, making the most of affordable ingredients.
So, Soweto has its own distinct food culture, born from its history. How does Andrew contrast that with Alex?
The key difference he highlights is the population dynamic. Soweto, while vast, is relatively stable, more multi-generational. Alexandra, however, is still seeing a constant influx of new settlers, people moving in, often from outside Johannesburg entirely, seeking that proximity to the city center.
So, Alex is still absorbing newcomers at a higher rate than Soweto.
That's the picture he paints. And this continuous influx puts that unique, intense pressure on Alex's already strained infrastructure. It explains why the congestion, the housing crisis, feels so particularly acute there. It's this constant churn, this dynamic of new arrivals squeezing into that tiny, historic space.
Which must make building community even harder, but also maybe more necessary.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the underlying cultural mechanism that somehow allows this incredibly dense, diverse, often stressed community to function day to day. It's Ubuntu.
The philosophy of I am because we are, interconnectedness, shared humanity.
Yes. The sources observe that despite the visible hardship, the improvised living, the competition for resources, the overall mood in Alex can often feel surprisingly communal. lighter than you might expect. Ubuntu is seen as the operating system that makes this possible.
How does it manifest in practice?
It means strangers, people from vastly different backgrounds, thrown together in close quarters, actively find ways to coexist, to help each other out, to share space, to negotiate problems. It's that inherent sense of shared community, that we're all in this together spirit, that allows daily life to continue, even in a place historically treated as nobody's baby. It's the social glue holding it all together.
So Alexandra's journey, it starts as this unique freehold anomaly, this brief promise of stability back in 1913.
Then it becomes nobody's baby, facing decades of systemic neglect by the colonial and apartheid states.
And now, post-apartheid, it's this hyper-congested symbol of modern inequality, still grappling with the legacy of that neglect, but facing new pressures of overcrowding.
It's truly been over 100 years of struggle, survival, and somehow refusal to be erased. That phrase really sticks. The township that refused to die.
And what we've hopefully shown in this deep dive is that survival wasn't just passive endurance. It was active. It was organized.
Absolutely. Think about the strategic brilliance of those early bus boycotts. The sophisticated self-governance of the Alexandra Action Committee creating a parallel administration. That's active resistance.
And the ingenuity isn't just political. It's deeply cultural and personal. It's in the persistence of people like Chef Zinel pursuing a dream against the odds.
And it's embedded right there in the food. Taking tripe and making muhodu a beloved dish. Taking cheap processed meats and creating the magnificent excess of the slide. That's creative resilience you can taste.
But the sources, particularly through Andrew's perspective, leave us with a final, quite challenging thought about the future. It's about where change ultimately comes from.
Yeah, it's a powerful point. He suggests that while government projects like the ARP, community structures, external support, they're all important, they can provide opportunities.
But
But the ultimate shift, especially in overcoming that sense of hopelessness that poverty can breed, has to start within the individual. You can't convince someone that tomorrow holds promise if they feel defeated today.
So it's about individual mindset, individual agency, even within a system that's structurally disadvantageous.
That's the provocation, that individuals need to find that internal drive, that belief in possibility, to challenge themselves first. Before the external solutions, the funding, the new houses, the infrastructure projects can really take root and succeed in tackling poverty and creating lasting opportunity.
It suggests that the incredible human spirit we've seen throughout Alex's history is not just a consequence of hardship, but maybe the most crucial ingredient for its future renewal, as important as any government plan.
Exactly. Resilience isn't just about surviving the past. It's the engine for building a better future. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe for more podcasts to come.